It's the ability to take that intangible thing from your head and go, okay, I would like to create. So instead of having to make it, for example, with your own hands, having the ability to describe how it is in your head into maybe voice to text to then generate image, being able to say, okay, well, these are the ideas I have. So the creative process is still there. It's just giving us more access to things we wouldn't necessarily have had access to in the past. And that's really exciting.
You're listening to With AI FM.
Hi everyone, welcome to Creatives with AI. I'm your host, Lena Robinson, and today we have a really interesting guest who I met October last year. I'm going to look at the name of what we went to. It was called Women Podcaster Creatives Meetup, and we did it at Amazon, and we hit it off straight away for a couple of reasons. She's my kind of lady. This is Tigz Rice, everybody. And she is what's called an empowering portrait photographer, also does videography and content creation. And I'll let her go into explaining more about that in a minute, but very much about providing empowerment and courage for women, particularly with amazing photography. She also happens to be a real expert in the Adobe community has been for over a decade. She's been shortlisted, I'm looking through my list because it's so massive, shortlisted for Digital Woman of the Year in 2021, also shortlisted for Digital Creator of the Year 2022, named in the top 100 inspiring businesswoman in the UK in 2023, and also happens to be an amazing author of a book called Striptease, which is also award-winning, having won a bronze in the IPPEs, I think they're called, in 2020, which is Independent Publishing Awards. So we're going to have a cracking day because this lady has got a lot of interesting background. So welcome, Tigz. And I'd really like you to tell the audience about your journey, about how you've gone through your career and how you've ended up talking to me today about creativity and AI.
Sure. Well, first, thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I know we've been trying to get this in the diary for a little while now. So thanks for your patience.
You're welcome.
So, I mean, that was a fantastic intro. My name is Tigz Rice. I describe myself as an empowerment photographer. And I have been helping people reconnect with their bodies and level up their digital visibility for the last 15 years. My background is actually illustration and graphic design. That's what I trained in at university. And I fell out of love with drawing, so picked up a camera and thought, this feels like a good place to start in terms of keeping my creativity going. And fell into the world of burlesque, the glitter, the sparkle. It drew me in like a magpie. And yeah, I absolutely fell in love with it. So I spent the first 10 years of my career traveling the world, photographing burlesquers and the legends of the stage. I went to see Miss Exotic World in Las Vegas, which was such an experience. So the first 10 years were predominantly photographing the stage and theatres and performers. And people then started coming to me saying, I love how you're documenting this. I would love to do that, but I'm not a model. I'm not a performer. Could you help me feel that way about my body? And so the boudoir side of everything kind of fell into place there as well. And then when 2020 hit and I lost so much work and I think it was like 9 months of work in 2 weeks. And it was around that time that B2C photography was banned, but B2B was okay. You could still do sort of brand shoots. So I pivoted slightly, and people have been saying to me, I want to feel that confident, but in my headshots or my business profiles. So the branding side of things kind of came in around that time, and actually has proven super popular that we've kept them going as well. So
I'm not surprised because so many people have, let's be honest, have the most uninspiring, boring photography that you can ever imagine on any of their biographies or on their LinkedIns or anything. So, yeah, I can imagine that was pretty popular.
Yeah, I often describe them as the corporate mugshot, as like the forced headshot that they make you have when you join a company. So, I'm on a mission to change that.
Because some of them are just horrendous, and you sit there going, why would you put that up? I mean, you can understand why a lot of people end up putting up, which I know doesn't really work, but they end up putting up like holiday snaps and things like that, because it's like the alternative is just like
Yeah.
bland.
Yeah. Yeah. Plain white walls in the office by the big desk, sort of trying to get that little bit of plain white wall to shoot on. So yeah. Yeah. Wherever I can remove one of those with something else, sort of, really makes you shine and shows your personality in a photo. That's what I love doing.
I think that's a really beautiful thing to be able to do, which leads us on to what would be really interesting to find out from you is obviously we're here to talk about creatives with AI and the world of AI and its impact on, from your perspective. Are you using it yourself at the moment?
Yeah, it filters in. I think it's been filtering in naturally, slowly over the years anyway. I've been a long, long time Adobe Photoshop users. And I remember when, gosh, I think it was just when I was in my last year of university and they brought in like some of the content aware features in terms of like fill and heal. And so yeah, especially in terms of removing wires from photos or removing people from backgrounds, I'm definitely leaning in and using sort of the AI generation features there. Played around a bit in Midjourney, so text to image creation, and the odd bit of Chat GPT. I have to admit, I'm not a huge user of it, but I think it's just filtering slowly into our lives anyway. So yeah, at some points I have been like, yes, let's try this brand new thing, and others it's like, let's see how this actually sits with my workflow.
How do you think that it's impacting on the industry as a whole? What's your sort of viewpoint on, particularly around the photography that you're doing? Like, what are you seeing? What's your view on that at the moment?
I think it's a really interesting time for photography. For many, many years, and maybe not so much recently, but if you go back into like many decades ago, photography was seen as um, it was proof. A lot of people said if it exists in a photo, it's real. And I think also to some extent we still have that because there's that phrase "pics or it didn't happen." Um, and so back in the day, we were like photographers were considered a reliable source, a trusted source. So that's if you look at when you sign forms, you can see that photographers are actually listed in there with legal professionals and teachers and people of high rankings. So it's been really interesting watching that shift over the last few years as, you know, editing, retouching are becoming more predominant. We're more aware of it as well. Not to say it didn't ever
Mm,
exist. People retouched in the darkroom. So I think there's been a real interesting shift that people are less likely to believe the contents of a photo now. Um, we're more likely to be questioning the reality of photos. And with generative, like text to image generation, I think it is opening up this world of creativity. I do not think AI is completely there yet. We're still ending up with six fingers or,
yeah.
some random things going on there. So, on one hand, it's opening up that maybe photos aren't the be all and end all of trust anymore. But then I
Mm,
also think I feel like there's going to be a split at some point between the AI content generation of creativity, but then this amazing space, especially in the world of empowerment and boudoir potentially, of honest documentation. And so it's
mm.
going to be interesting. I feel like there will eventually be a split where both will exist, both will have a place. And who knows? Who knows how that's going to ride out? But it's an interesting time for photography for sure.
It is an interesting time. I mean, what's your thoughts on, because obviously a lot of the work that you're doing is about giving women in particular a belief in themselves, an honesty and truthful kind of courage and self-belief and confidence. Like, we know that a lot of women do suffer for not having enough confidence. Not just women, loads of people, I think.
Yeah.
So where do you think it's going to go with, to your point, between the truthful confidence and making somebody look like, you know, we know for photography for a long time has had there's been an issue around making something look perfect, whatever the hell perfect is.
Mhm.
What's your sort of view on where AI should or shouldn't sit, or do you have a view on that with regards to the confidence and the truth and things?
I think that everyone should have a personal choice on how they want to be seen. And for some people, and I'm already kind of seeing the split in the industry between there's the highly polished, highly edited, the glamour filters,
Mm.
um, even in selfies. And you know what? Like, I like a filter occasionally. If I'm really tired, I will absolutely put a filter over it. So, but I think there needs to be choice, and I
Mm.
believe both should exist so that people feel comfortable in saying this, whether it's I want to be the most authentic, natural version of myself, and I would love for my cellulite and my rolls to be in the picture and just leave me as my perfectly imperfect self. But there is also a place for I want to be the fantasy version of me that I've always wanted to be. And both are so valid and so important. So both should exist. Personally, when I photograph, I tend to lead more towards the authentic, unfiltered side of things, especially when I show clients their photos. I want them to be able to see the beauty in them before the retouching takes place and then have that discussion on how they want those final images to look. But yeah, both are so valid. And I think it's important for us that we have both so that people have that
Mm.
choice.
Yeah, I think I hadn't really thought about it from a choice perspective, but I think that is quite important, and we all need to feel comfortable in how we're presenting ourselves, whether it be and we obviously will share Tig's different links to go and see her work because it's extraordinary. But you've got that two sides. You've got the boudoir personal side of things, but also the business side of things. And some people, that's quite a different version of self as well, which I think is quite an interesting area that you're kind of stepping across the two different personal and business, because I think a lot of people do a separation, yet um it's not an untruthful, it's just a different facet of themselves, isn't
I
it?
think I think we show up. Some of us may have different versions of ourselves that we choose to bring into different spaces, um, and especially neurodivergent people as well, who may find that they need to mask in specific scenarios to help them. There is so many reasons that we might show up or only bring portions of ourselves, whether that's, you know, even me as an online person. And I mean, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but perhaps you as well, you know, as a person who exists predominantly in the online space,
Mm.
there are facets of me that I'm like, those are off limit for people on
Yeah.
the internet. They're things I keep for my inner circle. And so, there are safety reasons why we might not show up as our full embodied self as well. So yeah, it's important to cater for that and say, hey, how do you want to be seen by your loved ones, or perhaps a significant lover if you're sending photos to them, versus how do I want my boss to see me on a Monday meeting at 9:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
Probably not the same version of you, but
No.
it's not to say that both aren't real, just
Mm.
that we have these different facets that we have to split to maintain a certain social responsibility.
No, that's true actually. I mean, it brings me to an interesting point, because the facets brings me to the point around creativity and what creativity actually is. So when you've got it in relation to AI, like how do you describe creativity, and then how do you then relate that to the world of AI?
Creativity for me, I think, is the ability to express ideas and imagination. And so for me, creativity could be, I think that encompasses writing, drawing, music, photography, anything that takes something that is intangibly in here,
Mhm.
whether that's a thought or an idea or a perception of the world, and makes it something that other people can see, experience, hear. Um, so, yeah, in terms of creativity, that's how I would describe it. And I cannot remember the second part of this
No, the
question.
second
Please
part was
remind
like,
me.
with your description of creativity, how are you then relating that to how AI fits into? the world of creativity from your perspective, whether it
Oh,
be
sure.
photography
So,
or what you're other things that you're doing?
yeah. So I think the really interesting thing about AI is that it's giving people more tools or access to tools that you might not have had before. So I, for example, absolutely love music. I have very little skill. I mean, I did play some instruments at school, but you know, I wouldn't know how to start with it. But having the ability, one of the tools that I use in my video process is Epidemic Sound, and it's got this AI feature in there to say how long you want it to be, and it can actually take the beats of these royalty-free music tracks and then say, okay, well, I need it to fit to this, and it's something that I wouldn't have been able to do. In the same way, I've been playing around with Adobe. They they have incredible tools out there for text to image as well. So there's a feature in there, and it's called Paper. So it's one of the boxes you can tick, and you can choose to make sort of illustrations. And I just I've always loved Illustrator as a tool, but I've just never had maybe the patience to sit down and learn it and learn about all the textures and everything else. And so I can create work in this paper style that I absolutely love, that I would just never have had the I would never, well, I don't want to say never, because I probably would at some point if I had the time sit there and do it, but I have the ability to express myself in ways that I haven't had the chance to, or don't have the skills or time or money to invest in the resources to do, and at least try it out and see if I might like that. And I feel the same for maybe disabled artists as well,
Mm.
who maybe don't have the if we're talking like maybe doesn't have fine motor skills or has always wanted to create something, it's the ability to take that intangible thing from your head and go, okay, I would like to create. So instead of being having to make it, for example, with your own hands, having the ability to describe the words that you, or describe how it is in your head into maybe voice to text to then generate image, being able to say, okay, well, these are the ideas I have, and create. So the creative process is still there. It's just giving us more access to things we wouldn't necessarily have had access to in the past. And
It's,
that's really exciting.
it is really exciting. It's an interesting point because I was at an event a couple of years ago, and they'd gathered us all together to sort of contribute to a white paper on AI. And I was asked that question about, like, where do I see one of the best uses of AI? And because I was just getting the FTSQ gallery up on its feet at that point, I was really thinking about the artists I had, and I had an artist that had been working with somebody with multiple sclerosis in a way of doing. Had been an artist but had to stop it because of the disease, and had helped that person. And then I thought, well, what if AI was capable of helping somebody who had those visions, was an artist, in either had been in the past or had always wanted to be, but to your point, hadn't been able to physically. Like, that's an amazing tool to be able
Mm-hmm.
to utilize, to your point. And I think this has come up as a discussion on the show before as well, about it's the vision. The tool is just AI is just the tool that enables the vision. And it was like, oh wow, that's opening up a whole new world for people that have potentially been sad and frustrated because of some kind of physical disability, whether it be an accident or something that's developed or something that they've always had, to then be able to create the thing that was always in their head. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Me too.
It's really
Because really,
cool.
the art is the concepts.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I mean, you can argue with painting; it's also the brushstrokes and it's the personal touch. But I think it's the being able to get that idea, that concept down and express it, that is the important part of what makes art.
Yeah. And I think a previous conversation I had with one of the other people, I think it was Michael Corley, and he's a UX designer, and he was talking about the onslaught, what he called the onslaught of AI, and the worry that the blandness that's going to happen. And I said, one of the things that we ended up talking about, though, was, again, it's the tool versus the vision. And I said, oh, the truly creative minds will still create extraordinary art and creative output. I'm in that, from that perspective, I'm not worried. Are you worried?
I think you could describe this as, you know, we've been through this so many times in the creative world already.
Mm.
Like, you could argue that when DSLRs started having auto features and then started doing your focus and depth of field and your shutter speed for you, that made it easier. Or the invention of smartphones with cameras, and then suddenly everyone has a camera and everyone is a photographer. But, you know, yes, there is an onslaught of mass production, but it is that creative, it's the people doing it differently. So yes,
Mm.
there will be more access to photography, art generated content, but the people who are the visionaries, the people that matter, are still going to be able to make their mark.
Well, I'm assuming then from that perspective, you're not particularly worried about the future of your business and career from that perspective.
I mean, I can't stop it, so I'm not going
Mhm.
to lose sleep overnight anyway. these things these things are going to happen. So but no, I think every creative pathway is going to be challenged.
Yeah.
You know, writing is having its moment with uh, generative. I mean, I'm going to use the example of ChatGPT. I know other ones exist, but you know, writing has the ChatGPT issues. Photographers have the text to image generators. Musicians have had their day. I mean, remember what happened with music, and then the whole like Spotify, Apple Music not buying CDs anymore. I mean, but that's gone full circle. People are buying vinyls.
I
We've
know.
gone all the way around. I have a vinyl player.
Amazing.
Love it, by the way.
I've
Um,
always owned a record player. I still do, and I've always owned vinyl. I think it's amazing. So yeah, with you on that.
but like things go full circle. I mean, if music has gone from vinyls to, I mean, we had tapes, we had CDs, we had mini discs. I mean, they were short lived, but
I know, right?
like, and then we've had iPods, and we've gone through streaming services, and now people are actively choosing to go back to
Mm.
technology that existed, oh my gosh, 60, 70 years ago. In fact, probably even longer. I mean,
Older.
don't, but yeah, I'm like thinking of the heyday of records, but um music has like, it's done the full circle. So, you know, everything, it's worth exploring the technology, but at the end of the day, things either move on for good or they roll round again.
Yeah. My prediction, based on what you've just said, very similar, is I think we've seen so many patterns. We saw it with social media, we saw it with photography, we saw, you know, to your point, there's so many patterns, and it tends to be the same pattern over
Mm.
and over again. So I'm with you on the fact that I think it will settle in, and then it will, to your point, become just the norm for things and how it's used. But I do still think that the extraordinary bit, which is the human mind, which challenges what exists anyway, as opposed to, you know, anything to do with AI and LLMs and so forth, which is looking back at data to create forward. I think humans do the forget what's happened, let's do something completely bonkers and different, which is what makes humans so bloody amazing.
Yeah.
It brings me to a good point then around a bit more of a newsy thing, which is around copyright, because we know that that's been there's conversations in
Yeah.
the zeitgeist at the moment on articles and different things with like Sir Paul McCartney and different music people and artists and so forth worried about copyright. And I would imagine that's something you've thought quite a bit about and have a view on. What is your view with regards to copyright and AI, or just copyright in general, really?
Um, it does. Copyright does worry me. In terms of a lot of the a lot of the programs that we're using for AI, especially ones that have been around for a while, don't necessarily have training on ethical sources. Um, I know that when the Lion, when that first came out, there was a website that you could go on and you could check if your work had ended up on there. And
Oh,
so my book cover has ended up in there quite a few times.
Wow.
And also, I do a lot of work for the Underpinnings Museum. It's a free resource all about underwear through the ages. So we've got things dating back hundreds of years. And a lot of that work, for some reason, has ended up in there as well. So if you're potentially trying to create anything in AI based on historical undergarments, it's likely training it on some of the work that I have produced.
Oh, wow.
And I've never given permission for my work to be in any of these.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, I'm not losing sleep over it. Like I don't really know. I could probably fight a little bit harder against it. I've chosen not to. Like, you know, but yeah, unfortunately, not everything that we're training on or our AI is being trained on has all of the right permissions. And I don't know how we fix that at this point, because I'm not sure that people want to go back and start training these AI systems again
I'm not sure
or
they
taking,
can even, maybe. I don't know.
yeah. Um, and so I'm aware that if my work is in there, who else's work is in there? Who am I
Yeah.
inadvertently copying or taking ideas from without intent? I don't think
Mm.
anyone's doing this with intent,
No,
but
I don't think so.
yeah, it's a tough one. And so yeah, the ethicalness of it is questionable. But I think if we had the ability to do it with the full permission of the artist putting their work in or the training materials, that would be a very different story.
It does seem to be it's around position, permission and credit where credit's due. It's also something that I've been thinking a lot about is, I love art history, and if you look back at art history, the whole reason different movements happened, like Cubism or Dadaism or what have you, was because there'd be a group of people that would be bouncing off each other and inspiring each other,
Mm-hmm.
which has always brought me to the thought, and it's something that whizzes around in my head a lot, is what's the difference at this point between inspiration and copying? And it's not something I've come down with an answer yet, because it's hard to tell. Like, is the learning side of the AI using it as inspiration, possibly, or is it copying? I don't know. Do you have a view on that, copying versus inspiration?
So the Design Copyright and Patents Act, I believe it's 1998, if anyone wants to look it up.
Oh, that needs updating, doesn't it?
Actually, well, I think there is an update on it. I think it has been updated since, but like that was when the main one came out. And it talks about the amount, it talks about copying versus, like we're talking plagiarism and basically copyright in general. And I believe the infringement comes in at like 10%.
Oh, that's
I think it's actually really, really small.
yeah.
Don't quote me on this. Please go read it if you
We'll
care
find it
about
and
it enough to do so.
we'll stick it in the notes, everybody. We'll find the link. You can go read
Um,
it yourselves.
but I believe, especially when I was at uni, and the conversation of copyright versus inspiration came up quite a lot. And I believe there is like a 10% ish threshold that people use when they're talking about the difference between inspiration and plagiarism.
Mm.
And yeah, so it's a really interesting line there in terms of, but how much, is it that it's recognizable? Because I've seen pictures go up where artists have used my work and I recognize the photo that they've used of mine that is the premise of the artwork that they've used. Now, most of them will at least send me a copy of it and say, hey, by the way, or tag
Right.
me in something. And it's nice to see artwork. It's nice to see it. It's nice to know that it's inspiring other work. But yeah, if the original artist can see the photo, their
Mm.
photo in the artwork, where is that? Because that would then be my pose, my composition, my lighting. So
Well,
I
it's your
guess it
vision and
depends
your
on,
work, isn't it?
yeah. So where is the 10%? Is it that it was the
Mm.
photograph, or is it the composition, the lighting, and the pose? But then also, is it mine, or is it the person who did the pose, like who directed the shot? So it's a
True.
whole little whirlwind of
It is.
everything. So yeah, I don't know that there is if this figure of 10% that I kind of went through uni feeling was the one, it's very hard to really define what it is. And really, I think it comes down to opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming there'll be lawyers out there that will go, well, it's not opinion, it's law. But like to your point, like how do you determine it, define it? It's a difficult one. The 10%, interestingly enough, is higher than I thought it would be. I thought it would be lower. Should
Do
be.
you know what? I'm gonna fact check myself after
I
this as well and double
right.
check it. But
We'll do
I
it.
it's not that high. I remember it being not that high. Like I think, or that might have been like the safe figure that it was sort of mentioned to me at the time. But
Yeah,
and I'm
we
not sure
will
if it's
fact
written
check it.
into that. But a really interesting case. I mean, it's not AI based, but it was a graffiti artist. There was a graffiti artist in the US that did a big mural based off a photo, and the photo was recognizable in the graffiti art.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and so that became a really big case. I believe
Mhm.
the photographer won. I will try and find that case for you so we can link that down below. But that's a really good example of like recognizing.
Yeah.
But then if we're using, we're not necessarily using from small batch sources anymore. We're using entirely trained AI
Yeah.
systems, um, with, you know, where are we going to find the thing that it's been trained on?
Was it
Um,
more Google image search? Maybe.
the reverse
Yeah.
image search, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and also content credentials is now becoming a thing as well, isn't it? So perhaps it will also make things easier to track down. Although at the moment I'm noticing that if you put content credentials into images, they can also be wiped by social media uploading.
Oh,
So it's not necessarily in there for good. Like sometimes it
right.
is getting stripped. The same with all of our EXIF data and metadata. Sometimes when we put things online, so
Oh, yeah, depending on how you put it up. Like I've
mm,
noticed that if you put it up through a third party uploading rather than putting it onto the social or what have you, everything, the meta can completely change. So yeah, or you put an image into Canva and then you back download it again because you've put a line on it or something and it will completely change the meta. So yeah, no, that's true. So that's a sort of the here and now. Looking into the immediate future then, so we're looking at sort of like 3 to 5 years out. You've been in the industry long enough and you've been around technology with regards to your creativity for a long time. Like in the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see AI shaping the creative world? Like, it's in its infancy at the moment, it's quickly evolving. Like, how are you and your peers anticipating sort of adjusting to all the changes in the next 3 to 5 years? What does 3 to 5 years even look like, do you think?
I think it's really even hard because of the speed that everything is
Mhm.
going at. It's really hard to know what 3 to 5 years might look
Mm,
like.
true.
My hope is that, like, I am actually really loving that we've got AI retouching tools. So being able to, especially sort of with Photoshop and even now in Lightroom, like content generation, um, text to image generate or text to retouching generation, I suppose, um, for me. So um, Photoshop specifically being able to get those wires and things out. If they can bring in more stuff like that for me, that'd be great because it's going to cut my editing time down significantly. Um, so in some ways, I'm so excited to embrace the tools that are coming. I'm also, I think for me, excited that things like Adobe also have extend video so that you can add clips to the beginning and end. So if you haven't shot things, and as someone who's really just sort of finding her feet in the video world as well, knowing that I've got some tools to help me if I don't quite get the shot, you know,
Mm,
really excites me, and it's making things more accessible for me to learn. I think the worry though is, are we using these tools for good? And are they going into the right hands?
mm.
And how are we moderating, I think is the word I'm looking for. How are we moderating the content we're putting out into the world with these tools?
I think that's an interesting question. I haven't talked to anybody yet that seems to have the answer at the moment. Um, or anything that I've understood anyway. I guess like most technology, like there's always that, like it can be used for good or it cannot be used for good. It can be used for
Yeah.
bad. Like we've seen that a lot. Unfortunately, human beings are what they are, and I guess the only way that that can be somewhat addressed is through law,
Hmm.
and setting. It's happened with social media, although that's still I think a little bit cowboyish, but compared to where it was, you and I are both old enough to know what it was like when it first got introduced, and it was like, it was like the Wild West. Now, that's not
Yes.
as bad as it was, for sure. There's still needing to be catch up because people are still, there's organisations still dealing with paper and so forth, which is just extraordinary. But I do think, I think law is going to have to come into it to a certain degree. I think ethics, I do some, uh, do some work with the World Ethical Data Foundation, so I know there's definitely organisations out there that are
Yeah.
working hard to ensure that technical areas, including AI, that it's in human rights and things are being protected ethically. But I do think that there's a long way to go. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that's really, if we're looking at the future of it, I think the tools that we are creating are wonderful. I think the real issue we're going to have is moderation
mm,
of what it's being used for and whether it's being used for good or not so good. Um, but yeah, the human mind works in mysterious ways sometimes, and
does.
you know, I
Wonderfully and not so wonderfully.
so yeah, I think that's my biggest concern moving forward is just the ethicalness of how we're choosing to use these tools, because we're now in a world where things don't go away. If you put it out, you put it online, it's there. And I think it's that remembering and educating the younger generations that the things that we're creating, saying, doing, using text to generate and create are just, you cannot get rid of them
Mm,
and even if you're creating things for good and you think it's good and it hasn't quite gone the way that you want, like maybe your intentions were misaligned slightly or it got taken out of context, like it's still there, it's
yeah.
still going to be there forever. So yeah, in a world of increasing content generation, I think it's just the education around using that mindfully and respectfully.
Yeah. Are you have you ever been and I didn't preempt this question by the way, so I'm throwing a curveball at you. Have you ever been involved in anything to do with the education side of whether it be mentoring or helping younger people with anything to do with the work that you're doing, creativity or anything? Is it something that you might be interested in doing in the future?
Well, for a very, very short time when I graduated, I did actually teach GCSE and A
Oh,
level graphic design. So I have done some work within education. I normally find, because the work I do within the boudoir scene is sort of, well, it's adult content,
yeah.
regardless of how you see it, it is for over 18s. So my involvement within the education system has been somewhat limited because of the choices I have made with my career.
Cool.
So I'm very open to it, and I do offer mentoring for, say, other photographers.
Oh,
But
that's
generally
cool.
speaking, the education system, and I completely understand it. I'm not always the perfect fit or the perfect role model. So,
Or I don't
but
know,
yeah,
you
I do
might
what
be
I
a
can.
role model. Um, it's an interesting one. I've just education, I think, seems to be coming up quite a lot. So I'm just looking at my notes. Education seems to be coming up as a topic of conversation where that's where I think we're going to get it right, is educating well, and and education can be at all levels. I'm still getting educated, and I just turned
Same.
52 last week. I think that there's a whole group of people older than me even that are going to need, if they don't want to be left behind, they're going to have to be educated. So yeah, it's an interesting area, because I do think that that's where I think humanity will, if we're going to get it right, it's going to be through education, because I think there's a lot of fear at the moment through a lack of education
Yeah.
around AI.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
think it's the unknown power of what we're creating.
yeah,
And it's, I mean, change is scary. All change
yep,
is scary. So yeah, we have some very fast moving, fast evolving technology in our hands. Like it's one of the fastest growing technology periods that we've been through. And
it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
life may not even look the same in 5 years. I constantly think we're getting closer to that. In Wall-E, when they all end up on the spaceship, and like everything is touch to go, and our chairs just move around for us. Like even 10 years ago, or however long that film came out, like, it just felt so wild that
Uh-huh.
that might be the thing. Or like you look at films like films that looked at the future, and like 2030 seems so far away, and now we're basically there.
No.
And and I mean,
What?
we don't have lightsabers,
No.
but we have plenty of other things.
They've tried to have those, like from Back to the Future. They've tried to have those floating hoverboards, and
Hoverboards, yeah.
but I bet you somewhere there's some scientific geeky person. I'm using it in the nicest way. Created a lightsaber. I bet you there's somebody that's created one somewhere.
I would love for that to exist. But,
Me too.
we can never. That was what was predicted that we'd be like around now, and I mean, it looks very different. And I don't think, I don't know. I mean, I think we predicted self-talking machines, or
Mm,
like fridges that can order food for you. I feel like those were things that we kind of expected to happen. Um, I saw a clip. It was going viral on TikTok the other day of a guy that had just got out of prison. And he was shouting like Coca-Cola into the machine, expecting it to do it for us. But I mean, that's not necessarily wrong, right? Like,
no,
so,
no,
and
it is.
you've got your, I mean, I'm not going to say it because there's one sat next to me, but our machines that we can talk to and say, hey, add this to my shopping list or whatever. So,
Yeah.
it's not unreasonable.
Do you know what? I've seen that a lot on movies and things where people have been in prison for like, 30, 40 years kind of thing, and they come out like the world must be mad compared to when they went in, like
Yeah.
it would be like you've jumped forward in time. I mean, it must be crack. I mean, I guess they see things on TV, but there's nothing like experiencing, like, having a machine, to your point, that my lodger comes in and she doesn't turn the lights on, she just tells it to turn the fairy lights on, and like there's no, what I
Yeah.
mean, like there's so many things. And to your point, the ordering of food through your fridges, or it automatically puts the list together because it's noticed that you haven't got enough cheese or milk or whatever. Like the world that they must be coming out into, oh my goodness, must be absolute bonkers.
I mean,
Anyway.
try speaking to yourself like 20 years ago. Like trying to I can imagine trying to have a conversation with teenage me who had just had a mobile phone, and at that point you could only send 10 text messages a day. 10. That was it. It was all you were allowed to send. And now I'm being explaining to that 15-year-old that okay, well, now I have a phone that my friends can send me 10 different WhatsApp messages a minute, and my emails ping every 5 seconds, and I'm so contactable. And that 15-year-old's mind would have been like, no,
Well, try
you
being
send
my
10.
age, and when I was 15, there wasn't even mobile phones. I remember being at school and the Xerox machine had a thing that you wound.
Really?
That is how old I am. but,
Oh
but,
my God.
but here's the thing. I know, right? But here's the thing is that we've adapted. Like I've adapted. Like I'm, doing stuff on my phone, and I'm doing stuff on my iPad. And I like at the moment here, I've got my phone with some notes on, I've got my iPad, I'm talking to you, recording this. And there's people my age that I know that are getting left behind, but there is also a whole lot of people like me, and I think it's probably because I've been in the tech and creative world for a long time. Like
Mm.
I'm curious, and I think something you brought up before, which I think is really key. You sound like you are happy to play with different things, and I think that self-education is being driven by that playfulness and that willing to give something a go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally all about, it's about the play. And not everything's right for all of us.
No.
I've picked up tools. I I'll be honest, I just don't understand ChatGPT. I mean, I do,
I'll
but
teach you. It's easy.
people show me great things that it does, and one of my friends, Scott, sends me things like, "Look what I did on ChatGPT." He's done these like deep dives, whole marketing, branding things. My brain does not think that way. I don't think to put words into something and get blocks of text out of it. But you give me a text to image generator, and I'm like, okay, well, I want 16:9 and I want it cinematic and I want these undertones and I want this kind of color palette. And so it's finding the ones that work for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there is, like the idea, like I know what Mid Journey does. I think it's amazing. If I was to go in there, I'd be lost. I wouldn't even know where to start. Interestingly enough, the secret that I found about ChatGPT, and I think because of the world you originally were in, you'll get this. I brief it like I'm briefing a creative. I talk to
Yep.
it and I
Yep.
write what I need exactly the way I brief an old school creative, or not even old school, just any kind of creative brief. And I think because I've taken that approach with it, and I think
Yep.
about, I'll load in audience and I'll load in, maybe a methodology or tool that I've created in my previous, consultancy world. And I'll load all these things up and say, based on all of this and based on what you remember I've already done on this thing before, and here's different places you should look and put in something. I literally treat it like I'm creative. And 99% of the time, it will come out with what I've asked. But it comes down to that ability to know how to brief, right?
Yeah.
And I think because I've
Yeah.
taken that approach to it, but that if I went into Mid Journey, I bet you if I tried that, it probably would. Oh, it probably wouldn't work. I wouldn't think, but I don't know. I do need to go into try, to your point, playing a bit more with different things. But yeah, you're right. I think there are different tools for different things, different activities. I mean, I use it quite a lot for just the research. Like, I love research, but I also know for me to do a proper deep dive into a company that I might need to do some research on, it will take me 2 or 3 days, even though I've got a form that I use for myself and a format and a way of doing things. Doing desk research would take me days and days. It's microseconds. I load in the company, I load in my form that I've always used to get the information because I know I want a certain amount of information. It comes back in seconds. Like,
Mm.
it's a combo of me and it. Anyway, so that's kind of 3 to 5 years out, way into the future. I was going to ask, where do you think it will go? But actually, I'm going to ask it in a slightly different way. Where do you hope creativity and AI, in relation to the world that you're working and living in, looks like in 5 to 10 years' time? What would you hope it's going to look like? So you're looking at the impact and where you think sort of new, create the new creatives, for example, that are coming up through the ranks, like
Yeah.
compared, what's that going to look like in 5 to 10 years time or beyond, do you think? Or do you hope
What
it
I
looks?
what I hope it looks like is making creativity more accessible to people
Mm,
again. I feel like creativity for a long time has been there has been a financial block on people getting into certain creative arts, whether that's instruments and not being able to afford those. Um, Maybe it's tools. I mean, cameras aren't cheap. We're talking thousands of
mm,
pounds for like basic stuff these days. Um, and so, what I would hope is that partly the education side of things is taught more in schools again, but also I know that creative subjects are falling off the curriculum in favor of STEM. Um, and so, what I would love to see is that it makes it more accessible for young people specifically to be able to explore creatively and give them that little spark of passion that goes, I could do something with this. Because it worries me that we're not bringing that through schools anymore in
mm,
the same way, that there, someone like me who did art and graphics and design technology and very much, well, I mean, if it came under creativity or romance languages, I was there.
me
But we
too.
don't have that now because we're focusing
Mm,
so much. And don't get me wrong, STEM is also so vitally important. Um, but for those who have that creativity and that spark within them that just needs a tool, we should be giving them access to these programs so that they can find that. And because at the end of the day, when everything goes, we saw it through lockdown, the thing that when it comes down to basic human need is creativity. We need
Yeah.
artists, we need musicians, we need joy in our lives. And so my hope is that we are empowering the next generation to go beyond even what we have
Mm.
and explore.
I think the exploratory thing's really interesting. And you're right, like when you think back at what we all leant into during the pandemic, which put a spotlight on humanity, was we all leaned into either things we'd done in the past. So I picked up, re-picked up photography. I re-picked up my knitting. People got back into baking or started
Mhm.
baking or creating things. And I think, yeah, you're right. Those areas of joy, like I think what they're getting wrong with the STEM thing is it's an either or, and it shouldn't be. Like when you look back at when in history of when have been the best times, it's when those two things together, um, Da Vinci is a prime example of a person that would, in this day and age, would have been STEM and art
Mhm.
creativity together. Like he was extraordinary for that. And I think, to your point, one of the things that I know, I was talking to an artist friend of mine, Anna, shout out to Anna Cowie, one of my artists. She is from New Zealand, and she was looking at, she's got a young son here in the UK, but she's understood that in New Zealand they're actually calling it STEAM, so the art is being put into it. And I know she had, I think,
Yes.
ex-tutors and things from her day at art colleges back in New Zealand coming over and trying to tell people about that. And I think, you can't, like if we were to lose all our, and this is one of the things I desperately hope doesn't happen, if we were to lose all our beautiful libraries or our art galleries
Mhm.
or museums or any of those things, or concert halls, or we know that when we didn't have the ability to go and see a concert or go see something, a piece of music being played, or going to the art galleries, we were all finding it really difficult, you
Yeah.
know so yeah, I think that's a very good thing, that I think we need to be tapping more into, is that making sure that the young ones coming up through don't forget that bit of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Well, look, it's been an absolutely lovely chat. Um, I've learnt some things. It's made me think about some things as well. Uh, I think AI, to your point, is something that we should not need, we should be playing with, not be afraid of, but also be mindful of the ethical side of it. um, I'm really excited to see what you continue to do. If you've got any um, uh, uh, projects that you're working on at the moment or coming up, that your sort of the next steps for you, what's coming up for you?
I've got quite a few workshops coming up, photography ones. Nothing with AI in, unfortunately, unless you
Okay,
unless you count the
we'll
things that are in
put
the
them in
cameras
the thingy for
themselves.
you, so don't worry.
Yeah, so I've got some of those coming up. I'm also working on a course at the moment as well. So yeah, I got bits and
You are
pieces.
educating.
Yeah, I'm working on one about posing, a sort of self posing. So how to feel more confident for yourself in front of the camera. So that's in the works. And then yeah, just playing with things, keeping curious and seeing where seeing where things go, I suppose.
Because you travel the world quite a bit. I know over sort of the December, January time, I think it was, you went to Japan, and
Did.
you do lots of other things. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing if you've got any more of those kind of projects coming up this year or next year.
I still actually have all of my content from Japan. I have not edited any of it. So we've got lots of that. I went to the Tokyo Labs. I absolutely love them. Have you ever heard of them?
Oh,
Oh, they're giant art installations, interactive art installations. So huge rooms. This one in particular that I went to had giant light bulbs
Oh,
hanging from
wow.
the ceiling, so you could kind of walk around and sort of have that experiential play. So I've got a couple of bits that I've shot, like self-portraits in there. Did a photo shoot with a geisha, so I still have to edit those. I can't believe I haven't done
Oh,
it yet. And
can't wait to do
then
that.
I've got a couple of trips. I was in Prague just before that as well. So I've got have a project that I call Door of the Day, and I go around taking photos of really interesting doors.
Oh, that's
So I've
cool.
got loads and loads of doors to do. But yeah, a couple of trips planned this year. Prague again, actually. Absolutely love that city. And then, yeah, future trips to Japan in the mix, but nothing
Oh.
soon. So, but yeah,
It's
need
on
to,
my bucket list, Japan, because it's a place of, from a cultural perspective, maybe not so, although I still want to go and see the city of Tokyo, but I've definitely been, maybe it's because I remember watching the original Shogun and things like that, but I desperately want to go to the countryside and
mhm,
experience villages and things. I think
yes.
it's an extraordinary country with an extraordinary culture and history. Its
Yeah.
contribution to the world is massive, continues to be.
Tokyo
That's
is an
really
amazing city. But yeah, so I've been learning Japanese now for 4 years. So when I go out there, I can sort of talk my way off the beaten track and sort of get more of
cool.
these sort of countryside Edo period experiences. So yeah, absolutely do it. Even if you've just got a few words, totally worth doing.
Excellent, excellent. Well, look, I want to say thank you very much for coming on. It was well worth the wait. I knew it would be. I really appreciate the time that you've given us today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you continue to do in the future. I think it's it's a cool to talk to somebody that's doing what you're doing with photography in a very different way, just generally, but just also to see how you utilize the AI to give you, maybe it's just freeing you up time, if anything, to help you
Yes.
with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on today. Thank you, listeners, for listening to both of us have a chat. And make sure, as what Tigz has been doing and what I continue to do, is go out there and continue to be curious when it comes to creativity and AI. See you later.